Here's something I wanted to cover just because it's mind-boggling to me about how everybody says Donald Trump is innocent. Not everybody, just his delusional coat. But you got key witnesses that the Department of Justice wants to question. Now, these are key witnesses that could clear Donald Trump's name. If Donald Trump did nothing wrong, these key witnesses can clear his name. Why is Donald Trump so hellbound on keeping them from talking? Pence isn't fighting the ruling that the judge made, compelling him to talk, to testify. Trump is. Trump is trying hard to keep key witnesses from testifying. What is there to testify to that could incriminate Trump if Trump did nothing wrong? Where's the logic in the way you MAGA cultists think?
This is Michael Popak, Legal AF. Donald Trump must like to lose appeals because he's about to lose another one, having filed today to try to stop Mike Pence, his former vice president, the one he called a P word, the one he thought that the insurrectionists should hang in the public square because he refused to certify the election using fake electors for Trump. There's a ruling that Pence must testify before the grand jury. It's not just one grand jury, mind you. It's at least 3 grand juries. Could be Mar-a-Lago and or the Jan 6th grand jury looking into the insurrection and Trump's clinging to power. And the third one is the big grift by Donald Trump in trying to raise money on the backs of a lie that Joe Biden lost the election. That Mike Pence, who already was compelled by Chief Judge Boasberg of the D.C. Circuit Court to testify and stripping him of any assertion of executive privilege, the privilege that a president, the current president has, the one that occupies the office. In other words, Joe Biden has today, and I'm looking at my watch, on the 10th of April, that executive privilege is held by Joe Biden, and he's already waived the privilege. It doesn't travel.
Yeah, that's 2 points I wanted to make. First of all, Trump doesn't have executive privilege. He's not president. Secondly, the Presidential Records Act does not allow a sitting president to leave office when their term is done to take documents from the White House. It says that those documents do not belong to the vice president or the president, and immediately when they leave office, go into the custody of the National Archives. But again, Donald Trump knows that his base and Republican voters are so delusionally stupid that they won't, and even if they do read it in front of their face and it says it right there, they'll just deny it. I don't know if you've heard on Fox News or when they previously when they were doing their reporting. Now that they're going through this lawsuit, they've been tightening it up a little bit. But where they would say alternate facts. Alternate facts is code word for bullshit. Or alternate facts, a delusional reality. So you can give, it could be a law that's been into place for 100 years and present that to a MAGA cultist, and they'll just deny it. They'll reject it. Doesn't matter to them. Truth does not matter. Facts does not matter to these MAGA cultists. It just doesn't matter to them. No matter which way and then this is the thing. They're so delusional and wrapped up in this false reality that when things don't go their way, they're confused. Trump didn't win 2020. They're confused. The Supreme Court didn't put Trump back in office. They're confused. The military didn't put Trump back in office. They're confused. They're confused because they reject the fact that the Supreme Court can't put him back in. They're delusional. They reject the fact that the military has no power to put Trump back in office, and they're delusional that they reject the fact that there's no voter fraud that has been proven. Then when things don't turn out their way, they look confused because they reject reality. They don't live in truth.
Well, with the former president, it doesn't travel with the 45th president. It's held by the 46th president. So this make-believe magical thinking that Donald Trump has an executive privilege that he can even assert for the time that he was in office, while the current president who holds the privilege has already waived it. This is one of the reasons, ladies and gentlemen, he's going to lose the appeal. The other reason is Mike Pence has already said, I'm not appealing. I like the order for Judge Boasberg. Chief Judge Boasberg said that for a very limited period of time, this is Mike Pence talking, while I was at the podium inside of the Senate chamber banging the gavel to certify the election, everything about that I don't have to testify to because I'm protected by a constitutional privilege called speech and debate, which is normally only for people who are actually Congress people, actually senators.
And here's what I think about Pence. I think he wanted to testify, but he was just waiting until he was forced by the courts. He put on this little show that, like for example, the January 6th wasn't entitled to his testimony, and then he feels that he was covered by some privilege, and the DOJ isn't privy to his testimony. However, the first moment he's compelled to testify, he ain't even fighting it. Donald Trump is coming in here trying to fight it for him because Pence wants to talk. First of all, if Pence can eliminate Donald Trump, that's one less person he has to fight for the presidency.
Senators and Congress people. But Boasberg said, you know what, in that role that you're serving in, where you're certifying elections, that seems like you should have a privilege. But for everything else, Mike Pence, everything else, the attacks on you, the pressure campaign launched by Donald Trump, by John Eastman, by Peter Navarro, by Mark Meadows, to try to pressure Mike Pence not to certify the election, to throw it to the state houses around the country, to try to throw the election to Donald Trump. All of that, Mike Pence, that you got to testify to. And Donald Trump's conversation with you in which he called you the P word, all came out during the Jan 6th committee investigation. That you got to testify to. You running for your life. This is the artist rendering of running for your life. And army crawling out of the Capitol when it was being attacked by Trump supporters and white supremacists and all of that. That you got to testify to. Your decision not to get into the Secret Service car who wanted to whisk you away from the Capitol so that you couldn't do the vote counting and the certification of the election. That you have to testify to. And of course, Donald Trump is all up in arms, so he's like, oh, I don't want him to testify to that. I'm going to try to assert executive privilege, because he doesn't have attorney-client privilege, because of course there's no attorney or client in this relationship, but there's an executive privilege. Problem is, Donald Trump has lost every time in the last month he's tried to assert executive privilege and taken an appeal to the D.C. Court of Appeals, which is the first stop on the train, and probably the last stop on the train. He lost 2 weeks ago when Evan Corcoran, his own lawyer, got stripped of attorney-client privilege to testify about Mar-a-Lago and the hiding and misappropriation of documents led by Donald Trump, in which the prior chief judge, Judge Beryl Howell, said, I think there's more than likely a crime that has been committed by Donald Trump with the assistance of his lawyer. I'm stripping away all privilege. Evan Corcoran, you go testify. Evan Corcoran took an appeal. Donald Trump took an appeal to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals and got a random 3-judge panel. And that 3-judge panel said, let's get all this wrapped up in 72 hours instead of 3 to 6 months.
It's clear that the Justice Department, judges, and all that, they're not playing with Donald Trump anymore. They're not playing with him. Donald Trump thought he was going to have his way through the court system by packing the courts and thinking that these judges were going to return the favor of him putting him in office. Didn't happen. And it's not going to happen. you got some loyalists. You got Clarence Thomas and the Republican base that's backed by that Nazi. But all in all, Donald Trump is like the Titanic, and he's going down. And then you clowns are gonna look confused when Donald Trump is convicted on more than one case. These are open and shut cases. He did what he's accused of doing, clear as day, out in the open. And then Donald Trump's worst enemy is his own mouth. He don't know how to shut his mouth. He puts his foot in his mouth. When he took the documents, yeah, I took the documents. You admitted to it, and you obstructed. And you admitted to obstructing it. Oh, we're allowed to negotiate. No, you're not. You stole the documents. They're not yours. You admitted to it. We already know what you did January 6th when you riled everybody up. There's never a rally of the opposing side on the day of certifying the election. But with you, there was a rally. And you directed them to go to the Capitol and fight like hell. All that saying to go there peacefully is irrelevant because we know why you did that. So you can later say, oh, well, I said peacefully. You know damn well telling these people that their vote was robbed for a year and a half. You've been saying that the election is going to be stolen. And then when you lose, you say it's stolen. You knew darn well what was going to happen. And then in Georgia, and the fake electors, the slate of electors, you can't just send an alternate slate of electors in. You got to go through the courts and litigate whatever needs to be litigated. You don't just send fake electors to take the place of the real electors and then send in fake documents. That's forgery. In my perspective, it's an open and shut case when it comes to Georgia.
And wrapped it all up in 72 hours. Required the Department of Justice to file briefs into the middle of the night, Donald Trump to do the same, and made a ruling. And the ruling was, you lose, Donald Trump. Evan Corcoran, go testify to the grand jury, and that's what he did. And Donald Trump did not take an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court for that, because he knows he doesn't have the numbers even there. Even the MAGA right wing on the Supreme Court aren't going to support him on presidential papers, on presidential crime, on presidential communications. He's lost every time in front of even this hand-picked Supreme Court. So put that aside. Last week, the one of the last decisions by Beryl Howell, the then chief judge, was to order that an entire group of almost a dozen insiders in the West Wing, chief policy advisors, the chief of staff, Mark Meadows, the entire security apparatus and advisors around Donald Trump, from his national security advisor, his director of national intelligence, his homeland security advisor, and Stephen Miller, for that matter, and Dan Scavino, that entire group, including led by Mark Meadows, they got to go and testify this week in front of the grand jury because Judge Beryl Howell said executive privilege isn't going to work here based on this, and it's held by the other person, the real president, number 46. So they have all been ordered, and an appeal got taken of that to another three-judge panel, new three judges, and they ruled in less than 72 hours.
Well, we already know that Trump is a loser, and him sending in an appeal, I mean, he know what it feels like to lose, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. But you could just, by Trump's actions, you already know he's guilty. An innocent man isn't fighting as hard as he is trying to fight to keep from people testifying that could possibly clear his name. So there's that. But again, I just want to get into this about if he's so innocent, why are you fighting so hard to keep from key witnesses talking that could possibly clear your name?